What up, guys? It's your boy, Lit Nomad. Sorry for the long break. I was having a little bit too much fun out here in Vietnam. But the video is about how to succeed in business. And I would summarize it like this. I would say it's kind of like being on a sailboat where you're subject to the randomness of the elements of the world. And what you're trying to do is survive the headwinds while getting maximum value out of the tailwinds. And so the quote that I like best that describes business is to say, you can't control the wind, but you can adjust your sails. So what are some tangible examples of business headwinds? Well, if you're a realtor, it would be something like rising interest rates making it difficult to finance homes. If you own restaurants, it could be something like COVID hitting out of the blue. If you deal with imports and exports in your business, it could be Trump's tariffs. And lastly, if you run a trading firm or work at a trading firm like I did, it would be something like a low volatility, low volume trading environment, making it difficult to scalp and arbitrage large amounts of money out of such a calm market. So now, what are examples of business tailwinds? Well, obviously, the opposite of all of those headwinds examples can be tailwinds. Like interest rates going down is good for a realtor. But I want to focus on one specific type of tailwind, which is the very bursty gold rush type of tailwind, because these are really exciting examples to talk about. Now, I'll go through three separate examples of these gold rushes. The first is the tech paradigm shift. So in the last few decades, there have been a few of these. The dot-com boom. We've got at least three out of the 4 or 5 FANG names out of this, right? We got Google, we got Facebook, now Meta, we got Amazon. These are firms that grew out of the advent of the internet and saw the business opportunity there. The next tech paradigm shift, I would say, is circa 2008 when the smartphone revolution hit. And the main difference here is that now you have computers that are portable, that are on everyone, right? I mean, they call them phones, but they're basically just mini portable computers. And the main value add here is the GPS and the fact that it's on you all the time. So you can unlock business models like Uber, or cabs can come to you and see where you are. You can unlock businesses like Tinder. And the next example I can think of, circa 2010s, is when like crypto and blockchain really blew up. There were a lot of opportunities there. And then the 2020s, I would say, has been mostly AI. The next category of gold rush, I would say, are regulatory or political paradigm shifts. So an example of that is when they legalized weed, or when they legalized online gambling. There were a lot of businesses that tried to rush into these spaces to capitalize on these regulatory changes. Now, as far as examples of political paradigm shifts, a great example is the fall of the USSR and how it created this vacuum for businesses to fill. And yes, it's true that a lot of the now oligarchs, a lot of them were friends with Boris Yeltsin, but some of them weren't. Some of them are just very entrepreneurial, risk-taking people who saw the opportunity and seized it. And it's funny because if you talk about Trump's tariffs, it's an example of both a business headwind and a tailwind, depending on who you ask. Because if you have an existing import-export dependent business with China, then, it is likely a headwind. But for some entrepreneurial guy in Vietnam, now this is your chance to try to fill that space and replicate that business model that normally was owned by China. Now you can try to do that from Vietnam. So that's a tailwind for them. And the third category of gold rush is crisis. There's this quote from JFK, which is something like, the Chinese character for crisis is danger plus opportunity. Or in other words, when there's blood on the streets, buy real estate. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this expression, but if you have the balls to buy real estate in somewhere like Ukraine right now, you could make a lot of money in 5 years. Where there's crisis, there's opportunity. Or as my favorite character in Game of Thrones, Littlefinger, likes to say, chaos is a ladder. This guy is my favorite character because he's just an ordinary guy, but he's very crafty and he's constantly playing the long game and calculating. And, he kind of reminds me of myself because that's kind of how I, made my way up in this world, in this competitive game of life. Like when I entered the hedge fund division of my trading firm, one of the reasons I did it is because Chaos is a ladder, bro. This hedge fund was completely disorganized and chaotic, and there was a lot of finger pointing going on, and people couldn't figure it out. And I came in there and I hustled my ass off and I sorted things out and I led the meetings, and all of a sudden I was like this shining light within this chaos. And the higher ups, the CTO and people were like, let me just talk to that guy. That guy knows what's going on at the hedge fund. And I got immediately promoted into this like high up position in the hedge fund, where I kind of had all these other groups like reporting up to me, like trading, quant, tech, operations were all like reporting up to me in weekly meetings. So yes, Littlefinger's right. Chaos is a ladder. Another more finance example I can think of is when the 2008 real estate crash happened and Goldman Sachs was going bankrupt, and Warren Buffett stepped in and lent Goldman Sachs some stupid billions of dollars on some really favorable terms. And you can look it up, but he made like billions of dollars from that deal with Goldman Sachs. So he clearly understands the Littlefinger mindset of chaos as a ladder. So we've covered three separate categories of gold rushes. There's tech paradigm shifts, regulatory and political shifts, and then there's the crisis. And I don't want to make it sound like it's so simple. Realistically, it's the smartest and most hardworking people that end up winning in these chaotic environments. And it's because highly intelligent people can see patterns and can go to where the puck is going. I mean, that's essentially one of the measurements of IQ. It's Raven's progressive matrices, it's pattern recognition. They can sort of see how the chaos is going to eventually settle and see the patterns in it, and they'll know where to invest their efforts to start some kind of a business. And of course, luck is going to play a role as well. So I don't want to make it sound like anyone can benefit in these situations, but in a gold rush, right, you don't necessarily want to chase the gold because it's so competitive and such a small percentage of people come out of there with most of the gold. The wisest, highest EV play in these gold rushes is to sell shovels. And the difference with selling shovels, if you compare it to baseball, when you chase the gold itself, it's like you're swinging for the fences. And when you swing hard, you have a high chance of missing. So with the startup, right, it's like a 5% success rate statistically. But when you sell shovels, it's a way higher success rate. It's probably like 50%. But, it's like bunting and trying to just make it to first base. You might make a quick $1 million or $2 million selling shovels. And with the actual example of selling shovels, Levi Strauss is an example of someone who sold shovels during the gold rushes, the actual gold rushes, because people needed denim jeans when they were digging and mining and stuff. And I think a great example of selling shovels is with my trading firm that I used to work for. We were a market making firm. So when that whole roaring kitty thing happened with Melvin Capital trying to short GameStop, and Roaring Kitty and all of his Wall Street bets people were buying the crap out of it, those guys were chasing gold, because when this thing was shooting up, there were opportunities to make a ton of money, especially if you were buying calls or just buying on leverage in some way. But my trading firm was selling shovels. What they did is market making. So they spent like 24 to 48 hours straight just standing up the trade desk. Once they got everything stood up, they were just trading the crap out of things two ways, right? Because that's what a market maker does. They're buying and selling for a profit. And the amount of volume and volatility in GameStop was crazy during this period of time. So they were making millions of dollars every day. And that's an example of selling shovels, because you're not really chasing which way it goes. You're just profiting from the volatility and the amount of volume of people just reaching both ways, reaching down to sell, reaching up to buy. You're just scalping it all day. So that's a great example of selling shovels, right? Some people who got into GameStop when it was too high, they lost a lot of money. So once the gold is gone, what happens? The people who originally mined all the gold and were early leave there billionaires. A couple of people who came in late get a few scraps. The people who sold shovels made their money. And then they all turn their attention to the new people coming in who are late to the game, and they sell hopes and dreams to all those people. So in the modern context, what this looks like is people selling newsletters or courses or books about, how to mine gold, how to make money in AI, I guess would be a more modern day example. And what these people don't realize is that the gold rush is over. But the gold rush for suckers is never over. So this is the new gold rush. It's selling the dream to the people who came late. Whether you're in a gold rush or outside of a gold rush, there's two main ways that you can make money in this world. One is you earn it, like a surgeon. You spend 10 years in medical school and residency and fellowship, specializing in this esoteric, complex skill so that you can charge and demand such a high salary on the free market after all of this rigorous training. Or or you can just take it. You can just take the money from someone else legally. An example of this is trading, where lots of trading is literally zero sum. Like the derivatives markets, futures and options, those are zero sum markets. You can get paid just as much as a surgeon while only having a 4-year degree. So in any environment, gold rush or not, there's always more opportunity if you're willing to be unethical and you're willing to dabble within the gray area of regulation. So ultimately, running a business or even life to a greater extent, it's like a long poker tournament where you're exposed to variance. So even if you're playing very plus EV poker, it's always going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And you kind of got to get used to riding those waves a little bit. You got to have the stomach for it, because as any poker player can tell you, there are going to be points where you run so bad. You know, in life, you're going to have a month where your girlfriend cheats on you, your dog dies, you get hit by a random drunk driver, you know, and you're like in a wheelchair or something. And you got to be ready for these lows. You know, they're going to come. You can't just off yourself during that month. You have to be mentally ready for it. And because you have to remember that there's an equal and opposite point where you're going to run super hot. You're going to run like God, where you're going to have aces back to back to back, and you need to get maximum value out of those situations. And so in many ways, running a business, it's kind of like being at war. You're like a military general like Napoleon, and you got to be strategizing and thinking, you know, even if I lose 3 major battles in a row, how am I going to adapt so that ultimately I can win the war? You know, you can't just be disheartened. Oh shit, we're losing. We lost 3 major battles. You got to just push through. Okay, how does this change my long-term strategy? You know, it takes thick skin. It's not for the faint of heart. And so I think that's important for people to understand if they want to get into the more entrepreneurial side of things. They have to be very adaptive, and they have to have thick skin, and they have to accept that variance is part of the game. So again, with the sailing analogy, you can't control the wind, but you can adjust your sails. So hope you guys learned something. Like, comment, subscribe. Take it easy.